Well, certainly none that were labeled as such.
Okay. You have no problems with his vital functions at any of those 3 visits in July, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, you have testified that the loss of that generally in starvation cases you will have a loss of tissue underneath the skin, correct?
Yes, I would agree with that.
And that you have fatty tissue. That fatty tissue is all over. It's in our faces, it's in our abdomens, our arms, legs, and everywhere else.
Pretty much.
And that certain kinds of rashes may develop if you are experiencing starvation.
Correct.
And is that because starvation, or why is that? What are the rashes?
I'm not really sure why they develop, but it probably has to do with changes in the skin, like less moisture in the skin and things of that nature. But beyond that, I can't tell you specifically why skin changes are part of starvation.
And then that if you are being starved, that you're increasingly less able to carry on physical activities, and that and as it becomes more and more extreme, you may not even be able to get up and walk or to do certain things like that because you've lost so much muscle. Your body's incapable of moving.
Correct.
Now, you noted that the hair starts falling out and becomes thinner and thinner and more breakable is a sign of starvation.
Yes.
And then in this term, there's 2 types of starvation, or I guess, is it malnutrition or starvation? The kwashiorkor? Can you pronounce that name for me?
Kwashiorkor? Yes.
Okay, thank you. Kwashiorkor and okay, I'm gonna spell this and make sure that we can do it on the spell correctly.
Yes.
Okay. And Your Honor, can I, as a demonstrative, just to show the spelling of the word publishing?
No.
Okay, good. And then on what is kwashiorkor?
So that kwashiorkor is a type of malnutrition where the person is still having access to carbs, carbohydrates, not necessarily a normal amount, but at least some, but is not having access to protein or fat. So they are getting some calories and a little bit of nutrition, but it's a very skewed kind of nutrition that really doesn't provide optimal conditions for the body to grow. And these are children that you may have seen photos of from West Africa, which is where this is seen most, where they are very underweight, very weak, and everything else, but have very distinctive things.
Okay. And then what is the other kind?
The other kind is called marasmus, M-A-R-A-S, M-U-S.
Okay. And so this, can I put distended belly under this term? Would that set it apart from this?
Yeah, that's kind of the characteristic feature of it. And they also tend to have very significant skin changes as well.
Okay. And should I put skin changes as well?
Yeah. And they also have more dramatic hair changes while that. Your hair typically changes to kind of an orange color and it becomes very brittle.
Okay. And then in regards to the marasmus,
Marasmus, yes.
marasmus.
And we actually, in the U.S., we don't really use the term as much anymore. We call it protein calorie malnutrition,
Which one?
marasmus. And the reason for that is because marasmus is the more typical type of malnutrition where the child's just not getting any nutrition at all, essentially. So it's not just the carbs they're missing out on, but they're missing out on protein and fat. So it's a global kind of malnutrition that is more typical for children that we see here in the U.S.
So, tell me the terminology you use again.
Protein,
Okay.
calorie, malnutrition.
Okay, and you said this is more of a global,
It just means global malnutrition. Like, in other words, the children are not getting any significant nutrients. And it's more the typical that we see here in the U.S.
okay, and so in regards to Benji's case, did he have kwashiorkor or did he have marasmus?
Yeah, marasmus.
Okay. And we're focused on this one, right?
Yes.
Marasmus. And are there any special, like, things that we look for under marasmus that we don't, that are different?
Well, they don't have the distinct belly. If anything, it's the opposite. They have going in belly, a concave belly, and because it just represents weight loss. They're just losing weight over every part of their body. They have. They also can have hair and skin changes, but they're not as dramatic as with kwashiorkor, which are really more subtle. But over time, they start losing hair as well, and they start getting skin rashes.
Okay, so they can also, so the skin change and hair change and rashes are not just for kwashiorkor, or it can also happen here.
Well, it's more dramatic with kwashiorkor, but it definitely happens with marasmus as well, especially as it becomes more severe.
Okay. Now, when you said that the newborn testing that they did for screening for genetic metabolic concern, they do a newborn testing. Why do they do that?
They look for 55 genetic or metabolic conditions that can seriously affect the child's health.
Okay, and in reviewing the records, do you recall, normally they do 2 screens, right?
Right.
And did you ever see a second screen for Benji?
I think I only saw one.
Okay, and why would you need a second screen? Why do they do 2 screens?
Well, in the ordinary situation where a baby's born and goes home the next day or the day after that, the parent, they haven't had enough protein feeds yet to really develop those metabolic pathways that are being tested. And so typically when a baby comes back in for his 2-week checkup, they go back to the hospital and have a second test. Now, since Benji was there for longer than just a couple of days, it's possible that they had something to do with why only one was done. I honestly don't know for sure. And it's entirely possible that he has a second one, but the results were just in a different place or something like that.
And so let's talk about metabolic issues that can arise after birth. Can you get metabolic disorders after birth?
There are a couple, there aren't very many, but there are a couple of metabolic conditions that can develop later.
And what are those?
Well, the most common one would be diabetes. The thyroid gland can develop problems later in life. That's called acquired hypothyroidism. And I guess there are a couple of other hormone-related ones. There's one called Cushing's syndrome, Addison's disease, and a few more. But they're pretty, with the exception of diabetes, they're pretty uncommon, especially in children, and are usually present in such a way that they can be identified early.
Okay, and what are some of the symptoms of diabetes?
It's called, the classic ones that we look for. And I'm going to say there's two kinds of diabetes. I'm going to talk about type 1 diabetes, which is the kind that usually presents in childhood. And the symptoms are drinking too much, drinking a lot, eating a lot, and urinating a lot.
Okay, and what would be a high blood sugar for a young boy or for a boy?
Pretty much the same as in adults, over 100.
And if Benjamin did have that and somebody missed it, could that cause starvation and death?
No, it's a different kind of death.
Did you testify previously regarding that same question and answered yes?
Well, I did testify previously about this issue and whether Benji had it. I don't remember that specific question being asked.
Would it help to refresh your recollection?
Sure.
Your statement?
Well, it could certainly cause death if someone missed it. Starvation probably isn't the right word.
Okay. But if somebody missed that when you had diabetes, it could cause death, correct?
It would cause death to miss type 1 diabetes, but typically it would be over the course of a week and a half or 2 weeks at the most. It wouldn't be something that took 9 months to develop.
Now, would you agree with me that in your specialization in child abuse, diabetes isn't really your focus? Is that correct?
Well, it is in the setting of medical neglect. Like if a family is not getting the diabetes treated, we would certainly get involved with that.
Okay, and so, are you aware that Benji received CPR in this case?
Yes, I am.
And that he had EMS came out to him?
Yes.
And that he had a finger stick glucose of 300?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
And is it possible he had diabetes?
Well, I mean, I guess it's possible he developed some form of diabetes as a terminal event, like as he was dying. But once again, diabetes doesn't, it doesn't take months for type 1 diabetes to kill somebody. It takes weeks. So the time frame is not consistent with diabetes for what happened the last few months of Benji's life.
Now, did you testify previously that in response to, is it possible you have diabetes? Yes, it is possible.
Well, I mean, I'd feel more comfortable if I could see the transcript of that. Yes, I did say it was nice. Um, I remember that it was elevated. I don't remember the exact number.
Would it help to see your card?
There you go. 214, yes.
Is that a high level?
It is.
Now, I need to show you what it as the EMS records from August 17, 2021. Would you agree with me that they indicate that they did perform a suction?
Assumption? Yes.
Okay, thank you. And would you agree with me that in addition to the EMS doing a suction on Benji, the ER doctor also did a suction of the contents, of the internal contents of the stomach?
Yes.
I pass the witness.
Member Seeker. Dr. Luther, I'm going to show you first what's already been introduced, exhibit number 103, which is the records from your pediatrician. Is what I'm showing you is exhibit number 103, that newborn X-ray.
Second test, yes. There it is. Okay.
Okay.
That is what that means.
There's that second test, and he's negative, right?
Correct. Everything was normal.
Okay. So again, that's for the 55. How does one die from type 1 diabetes?
So, type 1 diabetes means that the body just suddenly loses the ability to make insulin from the pancreas, and so it can't absorb glucose out of the bloodstream into the organs. And so glucose is what all of our organs live on every day, and so things start going badly very quickly once glucose is not available to the rest of the body. And so one thing that happens is the blood sugar builds up to very high levels and starts pulling water out of the body in the form of urine because of those high glucose levels. The second thing is the body starts looking around for other energy sources and starts metabolizing fat, in particular like crazy, which releases a waste product called ketones. And ketones are very toxic to the body at high levels. And so the ultimate cause of death with untreated type 1 diabetes is basically severe dehydration and what's called ketoacidosis.
And talking about ketoacidosis, would you expect if somebody has ketoacidosis there would be ketones in the blood?
I would.
What about acetone?
Acetone is one of the ketones, so yes.
So if Dr. Molina testified that she drew the blood and there was no acetone, what would that indicate to you?
That he wasn't having ketoacidosis.
It would not have died from type 1 diabetes.
Correct. Really a fatal case of type 1 diabetes would always involve ketoacidosis, and so if it wasn't there, then the cause of death was something else.
I want to talk about the records as it relates to the ER visit on 7/21 and 29. First of all, are you aware of glucose coding? Meaning codes that are entered in the medical records?
It's a clerical function, like in other words, the hospital or the emergency room's clerical staff, after the fact, codes the visit, and it's part of the billing process.
Okay, so is it a doctor who enters in codes?
It depends on the environment. I can tell you that the ER docs very rarely are the ones who enter their coding.
Okay. So I want to show you the record on 7/21 of 21. What is I'm going to spell HIRSUTISM.
Hirsutism?
Yes.
That means excessive body fat.
Could that also be consistent with Lanugo?
Yes, it did.
And again, Lanugo is consistent with the malnutrition.
Correct.
And again, that was the ER visit on 7/21 and 21.
Correct.
So I want to look at again, the record on 7/21 to 24. So where it says, has child had poor weight gain over the last few months? It says no. Is that fair to say? Did Benji go to the Joseph ER prior to 7/21 to 21?
Yes.
And what was his weight then?
Let's see, he had an ER visit on, I believe it was in April,
April 1st, I believe?
or March 25th and April 1st. So we had 2 ER visits earlier that year.
Okay, let's look at the one closest to that, 4/1 of 21.
Yes, sorry. For 1 of 21, he weighed 14.6 kilograms.
Okay. Is that consistent with the child having not having poor weight gain over the last few months?
Well, on July 21st, he weighed 13.8, so he actually lost, as I think has been pointed out, almost, almost a kilo. So he actually lost 2 pounds from April to July. So it would not be consistent with normal weight gain, obviously.
And that's at the same facility, right?
Correct.
Okay. These types of you need to see again that I'm talking about these screens that are entered in sometimes.
Oh, I don't have a copy of that.
Okay. Are logging just kind of clicking when you're going through the record, whether you do intake on somebody?
Yes, they're done very quickly, but I would also point out that the information is obtained from the parent or guardian who comes with the child.
And then in that, you can look below that. Does it talk about eating, child eating?
It does.
What does it say?
The question is, has child been eating/feeding less in the last few weeks? And the answer is reported is no.
Okay, so the parents at that point do not report that there's been eating issues and that there's no weight gain issues.
According to the record.
Ms. Sawyers was asking you questions as it relates to starvation and being able to carry on with daily activities. Is there some nuance to that?
I think so. I mean, starvation happens over a period of time in most cases. You know, it's a gradual process. It's not, in most cases, it's not that someone locks a child in the closet and then they don't get fed at all after that. It's a process of being fed too little, infrequently, things of that nature. And so it's a gradual loss of weight. And what you get with that is also a gradual loss of function. So it's not like from one day to the next they suddenly can't walk or something like that. It's a gradual weakening of the body over time.
But in somebody that's malnourished, have you seen cases where they can still walk?
Yes.
They can still talk?
Yes.
So just because the fact that a child is walking and talking does not mean that they are not malnourished.
Correct.
She asked you about negative effects on the bodily functions in prior visits. Is there enough information in the records for you to definitively say one way or another as it relates to his bodily organs?
I don't feel that there is enough information in the medical record. A lot of these are ER visits. The focus is on something else. The pediatrician visits, even there the focus was on something else, usually ear infections, which was also happening a lot to Benji that year. And so that was generally the reason that he was being brought in.
When we were talking about BMI and charting it specifically as it related to States Exhibit number 219, the Z-scores that we filled out, or the Z-score that we filled out for the BMI at its death. Why didn't you chart the BMI?
I apologize. There was an actual exhibit that was right here that now I'm not seeing, and I just want to make sure it isn't getting lost and might be able to work for someplace else.
This one?
No, it was this one, but without the extra marks.
I think it's better to
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure it was in the same place. Okay.
That's what I'm referring to, States Exhibit number 219. This particular exhibit.
Okay.
When charting BMI, you have to take into account the height, right?
Yes.
And so we've already discussed the height that you looked at was spurting. Is that fair to say?
Well, starting around age 4, it certainly looks like that at least some of the heights were not accurate because there's these outliers all over the place. So if you can't trust the height measurement, the BMI is not going to be trustworthy either.
So looking at the States Exhibit number 41. I want to go to these portions here. In your opinion, is it likely that Benji was getting shorter, getting taller, getting shorter and taller on the same day, and getting taller? Yeah. Is it this type of sporadic jumps in the record prevent you from relying on height as much? As it relates to self-harm that was indicated in the record on that shows that was in 7/21 of 21, to your recollection, did you see any other medical records that indicated that Benji was engaging in self-harming behavior?
On the ER record from August the 17th, the day that he died, Dr. Kumar, who was the treating physician that day, made a note per parent. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. This is from the prior. She made a note that on the prior ER visit, the parents reported Benji had a history of self-harming behavior. And also on that day, it's noted that the stepmother described numerous episodes where Benji was trying to make himself throw up.
So other than the 7/21 and the 8/17, did you ever see any other medical records to indicate that the parents are reporting that Benji is engaging in self-harming behavior?
No.
So, Ms. Boyers went over with you some pictures and asked, is there a buccal fat in this photograph? My question to you is that even on the date of his, let's say the picture on the right, does he still have buccal fat on in that picture?
Is there a way that I can see the picture itself?
I only have this one picture, but I can rotate the TV for you.
Can I
Is
stay
there
there?
anything that's not good?
Well, it definitely has buccal fat. His cheeks are nice and round. Here you kind of get an idea that he may not, because you do have a little, kind of like a little concave right there. So I would say it's, it certainly appears to be less
And that's my point, is that what we're looking at is the change in the buccal fat. Is that fair to say?
there's definitely a change.
Can somebody still have buccal fat and a child still have buccal fat and still be diet or suffer from malnutrition and starvation?
Yes, once again, I'm sure that it's really kind of a gradient where you don't suddenly lose it one day. It gradually diminishes over some period of time. So yes, I think it is possible to be malnourished and still have a little bit of buccal fat.
All that's this is
I'm just debating whether to take our. I'm going to take aspirin.
All right, Senator.
probably information they should have shared with you if you're gonna. Holy moly. Yeah.
some photos, and as you can see on the left, he has his arms down, and you can't really tell, but you can look, the way that your body's positioned can make you look more gaunt than in others, correct?
Maybe to a certain extent. I really don't think it could cause that dramatic of a difference between the two pictures.
So, I want to show you what's been marked as Defendant Exhibit 31. And you testified earlier that you had less concerns over this photo, correct?
Yes.
And you see, would you agree with me that he's showing legal fat?
It looks like it, yes.
Okay. And that the angle of this photo, even though he has his shirt off, is more similar in facial expression to how the photo on the left looked, correct? Because he was smiling in both photos.
Oh, well, that's true.
And so it's hard to compare these different body statures when your face is sucking on a bottle versus when you're smiling, right? It gives you two different presentations.
Yes, it's going to be a different presentation.
And then when we went back to Defendant's Exhibit 32, you can see that you would agree that he's not wearing anything that's covering his arms, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what date that photo was taken?
No.
Okay. Do you know what date this photo was taken? The Defendant's 31.
I don't. I'm not.
Do you know
Not for
what
certain.
date this photo was taken? Defendant's Exhibit 22.
I know.
Would it surprise you to learn that this is the photo of Benjamin on the date that he passed?
Yes, that is a little bit surprising.
So, I want to ask you, what are some other ways that someone can pass away that, for instance, suffocation? We heard testimony from Dr. Molina yesterday that she cannot rule out suffocation. Did y'all consider suffocation in this case?
I did not.
She also said that she cannot rule out arrhythmia. Did y'all consider arrhythmia in this case?
I did not. I don't recall if they got any EKG tracings on him before he died. I don't think they did. So I'm sure, I don't think it was ruled out in this case.
And you would agree with me, or are you aware that you can do genetic testing to after the fact to determine whether someone will be predisposed to genetic arrhythmia?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
And that was not done here. Are you aware that it was not done here?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
So, in evaluating this case, you evaluated it for anything other than starvation?
I have to say, my evaluation actually began when the autopsy report came back, and, you know, at that point, it was pretty self-evident, you know, that he was severely underweight, and that the other findings that we've talked about strongly supported that diagnosis, and I had no reason to question it.
All right, so the answer is no, you didn't consider any other possibility, correct?
Well, none seem to be evident from the available information, so based on that, I would say no. I did not consider other conditions.
In your review of this case, you did not review the CPS records, correct?
No, correct.
You did not review the body-worn camera that captures Benji talking to the officers on July 20th, 2021, correct?
Correct.
And you did not review the recordings of him talking to CPS on 7/20/2021, correct?
I did not, correct.
Did you review the recordings of Leo talking to the CPS records on 8/17/2021?
Of Leo?
Yeah. Do you know?
The sibling? I did not.
And so if there was an outcry that Miranda had hit the mouth of Benji and blood was coming out by Leo, you didn't review that?
I was not aware of that.
So that none of that came into your consideration, right?
No, I have to say no.
And let's talk about the things in the report about, or Dr. Molina, you have, according to you, gone and looked at other cases that were alleged to have starvation in them, and you would agree with me that one of the things that they look at is growth arrest lines on the x-ray of these individuals, correct?
Correct.
And was that done here?
I really don't know. The x-rays were taken by the medical examiner, and I don't know. There's no report in the information that I got about if the x-rays were read, so I don't have an answer to your question.
Okay, so she provided you no details in the autopsy report to say that the growth arrest lines, what she found, if she found anything.
No, it just says a full body radiology study was obtained, but there's no information about how the x-rays were read, if they showed anything.
You would agree with me.
Actually, I take that back. It says, oh no, it doesn't say what the reading was. Sorry.
So she took x-rays, but it has no findings. It has, well, it does address the fact that there's no findings from the x-ray, correct, in the autopsy report?
Well, I thought it might, but actually on rereading it, it doesn't even say that. It just says full body radiographs are performed.
Okay. Now, you would agree with me, there needs to be a distinction between, or there is, between malnourished and starved, right? Because we keep using those terms interchangeably. And right now, this is a very critical, would you agree with me that being accused of starving a child is a very heinous crime?
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And so we wouldn't want to confuse being malnourished with starvation, right? Because even though it's a scale of the spectrum, using these terms interchangeably can be very misleading.
I would agree with that. I personally do not look at them as being the same thing, and I don't think in the medical world generally they're looked on as the same thing. Malnourishment is the broader category, and starvation is the more severe end of that.
Okay, so when we talk about, the fact that a child may be malnourished, that is not the same thing as saying they are starved, correct?
I would agree with that.
when we talk about stunting, you would agree that there's no evidence at this stage that you have of stunting?
That's correct. That refers to loss of height potential, and his height had returned to the normal range by age 3.5 or so.
Now, your statement earlier that relied on Dr. Molina finding no ketones, right? That was your, or I apologize. I think the state told you that Dr. Molina said she found no ketones. Did you
Correct.
hear them say that?
Correct.
You didn't say that Dr. Molina found no ketones.
I didn't say that myself. I didn't have that information.
And the reality is that when Dr. Molina does her autopsy, she performs labs, correct?
Correct.
Part of her autopsy, and you review those labs or the findings, or you can review them.
Yes.
But you also have to look at whether or not the lab was done correctly. Correct?
Well, that's not information that I would typically have, but it is important that the labs be done correctly. I would agree with that.
Yeah, you have to take that into consideration when you are looking at a lab to whether or not you should rely on it or not. Correct?
Well, if information comes to light that the labs were not performed correctly, then that would certainly cast doubt on their reliability. But I did not have any such information.
And are you aware that the labs were not done until over a month after Benji passed?
No, I wasn't aware of that. I'm not too surprised to hear that, but I had not specifically been informed of that.
And that was the labs that were done in-house, and the labs that were done that they sent off to NMS labs were not done until almost over 2.5 months later. Did that surprise you?
No, given the backlog in our medical examiner's office, how far behind they are on cases, I'd have to say that doesn't surprise me a lot.
And are you aware that the autopsy in this case was done in August 18th, 2021?
Yes.
And that Dr. Molina testified yesterday that her medical examiner's office is under probation starting in August of 2021.
But I'm going to check the mischaracterization. There was a provisional status. I'm going to check the mischaracterization.
No.
If you want to I'm sorry, sorry.
I asked her specifically after she used the word provisional status, and she agreed that I said, what month did you go on probation? And she said August of 2021.
Considering the witness, I'll let you ask the question and he can correct you if he knows, if he has personal knowledge.
Are you aware that Dr. Molina's office went on probation in August of 2021?
Actually, now that you mention it, I believe I had heard that, but I don't have any details or any further information.
So I want to talk about the accuracy of labs or the stability of a sample. Let me ask you, in regards to glucose, for instance, is it stable or unstable after it is taken out of the body?
Well, over what period of time, and also whether or not it was frozen. In situations like this, one of the what am I trying to say? The delay in processing them isn't necessarily a bad thing, assuming the samples were promptly frozen. In that situation, they're stable for quite some time. But I don't have any personal information of whether that was done, when, how long after they were drawn, etc.
But we have admitted as Defendant's Exhibit 33, Dr. Molina's full report of
Yes.
And that you track that chain of custody and verify how it's stored, when it's stored, and by whom it's stored, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so if Dr. Molina's file does not include any of that important information, that would be relevant.
I really don't have personal knowledge about the procedures that are followed or need to be followed in a laboratory like that.
But in general, with the chain of custody and how the item, the sample is preserved is important to know, correct?
Oh, yes.
Because it affects the accuracy of the lab result that follows it. Correct?
It definitely pertains to the accuracy of the results. Yes, I would agree.
I pass the witness.
Mr. Chairman, as it relates to all these questions about the lab, fair to say Dr. Molina would be the better person to ask those questions to, correct?
Definitely.
You didn't review Dr. Molina's testimony, did you, prior to testifying today?
No.
So you're not aware that Ms. Sawyers didn't ask Dr. Molina any of those questions?
I wasn't aware of that.
She asked you about the body worn camera that you may or may not have reviewed. So you didn't review any body worn camera that shows Benji asking his dad for food several times.
I did not.
You didn't review a body worn camera where Benji is talking to a detective and is distracted by food behind him.
No.
You didn't review that. Okay. As it relates to arrhythmias, did you find any evidence that Benji had any arrhythmic disorder in the medical records?
No, I didn't see any evidence of that. I was looking to see if by chance his heart rate had come back to the point that they were able to get an EKG tracing, but it does not appear that happened.
Okay. So, just because, so let's say Benji did have genetic testing afterwards, and the genetic test came back that he has a genetic marker. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, it's very variable from condition to condition. Sometimes it's just a marker, meaning that maybe there's some increased risk, but it doesn't confirm the diagnosis. But there are a few things where having an abnormal gene may be much more important as a potential cause.
But a genetic marker doesn't mean that you have it, right?
Yeah, that's what I meant to say, is that usually not. Usually it just means that maybe there's some increased risk.
Okay. So the fact that he would have been genetically tested doesn't mean that he actually had it, even if he did have that marker.
I would agree with that.
As it relates to growth arrest lines, you're not aware of any testing that Dr. Molina or consulting that she may have done as it relates to growth arrest lines, are you?
No, I'm not. The x-rays were obtained that conceivably could have shown whether he had growth arrest lines, but once again, I don't have any indication about who evaluated the x-rays and what they said.
Are growth arrest lines only indicative of starvation?
No.
What also could they be indicative of?
So what they indicate, the growth arrest lines are white lines on the ends of the long bones, like the arms and legs. And they're actually very similar to tree rings in trees. And what it means is that a child's bones stopped growing for a while and then started growing again. And when that happens, there's a white line of calcium that's deposited. And so it's an indicator that growth was temporarily slowed down and then recovered. And we see those really all the time. Like for instance, let's say a child has a severe illness, like pneumonia or something, and is in the hospital for 2 or 3 weeks. Even that would be enough time to trigger the development of a growth arrest line. So it doesn't always mean starvation. It means basically just that something slowed down the child's growth for some period, and it doesn't really tell you what that was.
Is it necessary in order to make a finding of starvation to find growth arrest lines?
No, I have never seen anything that indicated that that was a requirement to say that a child had been starved.
What are you talking about? This is where you asked you about considering other things. Or do you consider this? As part of your analysis, did you exclude or, for lack of a term, exclude other potential reasons to attribute to Benji starvation? I mean, did you consider type 1 diabetes?
I would have to say no to type 1 diabetes and no to other conditions in general, because the information was very consistent with starvation. In other words, we had multiple findings on the autopsy, like the lack of fat and the lack of any significant food material in his intestines, that all pointed back to starvation as being by far the most likely cause.
So if there were other signs pointing to one direction, would you just ignore those?
No. I mean, that's why we review the records like we do and review the autopsy and so forth, is specifically to look and see if the information's consistent with what we're thinking, or if we keep bumping into inconsistencies that don't really fit, well then that tells us we have to keep looking for other causes.
Did you run into the inconsistencies in your review?
No, I have to say I really didn't.
No, I need to follow up on that last. So no inconsistencies. So let me ask you, if you have a mother or a stepmom who has 4 kids in the house and on very little sleep, newborn baby, potentially has postpartum, and did you review that for any review this case at all to see whether or not in a moment she did something to the child for suffocation? Because you didn't consider that theory at all, did you?
Well, we didn't have any indication that would lead us to suspect that. So in answer to the first part of your question, no, we really didn't. I really didn't consider the possibility that a particular individual did or didn't kill Benji, because, like for instance, in the case that you're talking about, the information that we got from Child Protective Services was that the other children were growing fine, and that none of the other children were having issues with eating disorders and not gaining weight and that sort of thing.
Right, and that's actually a contraindication that this child's not being fed, because other kids are being fed, and there is, so the videos that you watched or what you were shown, at no point did any of that include videos that were made by Miranda that talked about her growing frustration with Benji.
I was made aware of some of that information. I'll be honest with you, I can't, that would most likely have been after I prepared my report for CPS. I don't think I had that information at the time that I was evaluating the autopsy, et cetera.
Okay, so, the fact now that you have become aware of it, I mean, you would agree with me that when you say that there was nothing inconsistent with starvation, that's because you hadn't considered any of that other information that you didn't have access to, that wasn't provided to you, correct?
Well, it's kind of hard to consider something I don't have access to.
Fair. So, let me ask you, you talked about the growth arrest lines, but they're not a requirement for defining starvation or finding starvation. But would you agree with me that there is no medical test that we can perform for starvation to rule it in or rule it out?
What I would say is it's a constellation of physical findings and laboratory findings. There's not a single test. There are multiple tests and findings have to be present.
Well, and there's no test for starvation, it's the elimination of other options, right? Because generally speaking, as you have already stated, it is very rare for us to have a claim of pure starvation. Generally, you would die, before you would die of starvation, you would die from some complication from starvation. Is that correct?
I don't think that's necessarily true. The few cases that I've had of where a child dies from starvation, they don't typically have other causes of their death. In other words, like in the third world, you expect that a child will develop pneumonia or some other infection before they die of starvation. But here in the U.S., that's not necessarily true.
Right, because the starvation cases that are generally prosecuted are ones where they are locked up and you know they weren't getting food, right?
That has not been my experience.
The crib death, have you heard of that case?
The crib death?
Well, for instance, when a child is left in a crib and not fed, they know that they weren't getting fed, then it's a very clear indication that it's starvation, right?
Hypothetically. Yes, I mean, I don't know the details of the case you're talking about, so for me, it's a hypothetical case.
So the further we get away from an absolute locking up and failure to be able to access food, the harder it is for us to be sure about starvation. Because there could be other issues, medical issues that are coming into play that if you're not looking for them, you didn't consider them, correct?
Well, I mean, I personally don't think that applies to Benji's case because we certainly did, the ER in particular certainly did obtain the lab that they could obtain at the time. If you look at the physical findings on autopsy, no fat in his body, no food, in his GI tract, his overall physical appearance. I mean, it does not. The findings that we have all point towards starvation.
Okay. So, Defendant's Exhibit 22, this is Benji on the day he passed, 3 hours before he passed. And he had his stomach suctioned out through the through the EMS, correct?
Yes.
He had his stomach suctioned at the ER, correct?
Yes.
He had a bowel movement, a large, hard bowel movement in his diaper at the time of death, correct?
Yes.
He had a full
Yes, that's what's reported.
And he also, there's evidence that he peed in his bed with a huge urine puddle, and that he peed in the car on the way to the hospital. Are you aware of that?
I don't think I had heard that last one, but I had heard the other things that you mentioned.
Right. So when we're looking at all of this, and with our own eyes, just looking at it, it does not look like a case of someone who is locked up and is prevented from getting food. This is a case of something that has been missed.
Judge, I don't even think the argument is not even allowed to question.
I pass the witness.
I just have very few questions. She spends a lot of time asking about basically restraining the child. Is there another way to prevent a child from getting food?
Yes,
What is that?
putting a lock on the refrigerator in the cabinet.
Where the food is stored?
Yes.
I'll pass the question.
No further questions.
Does Dr. Lucifer be excused?
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Lucifer, thank you very much for your time and your efforts today. If you have any exhibits, just give those to the state as we walk out. Thank you very much.
I think I managed to return it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Keep going. State, do you have another witness?
Yes, Judge. State calls Candace Sanchez.
Good afternoon. If you could please have a seat up here. Please raise your right hand and state your full name.
Candace Irene Sanchez.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Ms. Sanchez, the microphone in front of you can be moved however you need to so we can hear you. The young lady in front of you is a court reporter, and she takes down everything we say, so it's important that you speak up and speak clearly and do not speak over anybody. When you see one of these attorneys stand up while you are talking, please stop talking, and I will let you know when it's safe to proceed. Thank you very much. Mr. DeVito.
Thank you, Judge. So, Ms. Sanchez, is that your maiden name?
Yes,
Are you related to the defendant, Brandon Severo?
I'm sorry. I entered, yes, my maiden name is Sanchez.
It's okay.
I'm so sorry. No, that's not my maiden name.
I was going to get there, but you figured out what I was. So, what is your maiden name?
It's Cetera.
And are you a relative of the defendant?
Yes,
How are you related?
I'm his sister,
And so, then what would your relationship to Benjamin be?
his aunt.
When was it that Benjamin first came to live kind of like full-time with Brandon? With what year? Do you remember how old Benji was?
I believe he was 2.
Okay, so when Benji was 2, he started living with Brandon, right?
Yes.
Now, when Benji started living with Brandon, what was your involvement, if any?
I would watch Benjamin for my brother.
Okay, and what was the time period where, I'm sorry, you said that you would watch it. When is it that you would watch it?
Monday through Friday.
So,
And
what time on Monday through Friday?
from the morning, it kind of differed. It was either morning till time he would get out, or I would keep him
So what was happening?
overnight.
What was happening what was Brandon doing while you had Benji?
At work,
So, you're watching Benjamin while he's at work. Do you have children of your own?
I do
How many?
10 total.
And so you have some experience. And at the time, how many children did you have when Benji was 2?
I had 8.
So you had some experience caring for children, and your brother was aware of this.
Yes.
And so, how did this arrangement develop where you agreed to watch Benji during the day while he was at work? Like, why did you, like, how long did that last? That you were watching him during the day?
About 6 months, I would say.
So, during those 6 months, how would that work? Like, did you and the defendant live together?
No.
So then, where would Benji sleep on a weeknight, for example?
With his father?
So basically it was like daycare with auntie.
Yes.
Okay. You said he was about 2 years old. Was he potty trained when you first started watching him?
No, he wasn't.
While you were watching him, did you attempt to potty train Benji?
Yes.
How did that go?
It went well?
And he was able to get off diapers?
Yes.
Did he have an excessive amount of accidents for a child who's off diapers? Like compared to others, you've had other children get potty trained, right?
Correct.
Compared to the other children that you've seen be potty trained, was Benjamin having more accidents than normal?
I don't remember.
But you remember that he was out of diapers?
Yes.
When was it, during that same time period, what if any issues did Benjamin have eating food or gaining weight?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
So, when you had Benjamin and you were watching him, would you feed him lunch?
Yes.
Would he eat lunch?
Yes.
Did it appear to you that he was growing normally while you were watching him?
Yes.
Like, he got bigger a little bit?
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez, I'm going to have you pull the microphone and move it a little closer to your.
Okay.
You can move the entire thing. Just kind of move it across the desk a little bit.
This way?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you very much.
And is it true that you also, during this time period, you would watch Brandon Jr., right?
No.
Less so?
No.
Not even after school?
No.
Okay. So where was Brandon Jr. while you were watching Benji?
It'd either be my mother or my sister.
Oh, okay. I think. So, when is it that you stop watching Benji? I'm going to show you an exhibit. It's been marked as, I believe it's Defense Exhibit 30. I'm sorry, Judge.
Yes, ma'am. You have a leave about the court.
showing it was been marked as State's Exhibit 30, Defense Exhibit 34. Can you see that at all if you turn? You see this period here? It's marking, there's 30 months, and it says January 2019.
Yes.
Does it seem to you about accurate that about January of 2019 would have been when Benjamin first came to live with Brandon as the custodial parent?
I'm not sure of the date.
But it would have been when he's about 2, right? Or sometime when he's 2.
Yes.
And if you look down here at the bottom of States 34, I mean, this is Benji's age in months. So he would turn 2 somewhere here about halfway between 20 and 30 months, right?
Yes.
And so it would have been sometime before he turned 36 months that he would have started living with Brandon, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it was sometime around January of 2019. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. So when was it that you stopped seeing him, like you said, about 6 months later is when you stopped having him most weekdays?
Yes.
Okay. Why did that change?
I was pregnant at the time, and I was sick, so I wasn't able to, I was put on bed rest.
Mhm. And so who was watching Benji instead?
I don't know.
When, if at all, did you become aware that Benji had started using diapers?
Sometime in June,
June of which year?
2021, I believe.
2021. So in June of 2021, how do you find out that he's using diapers?
I was told,
Who told you?
my brother, Brandon.
Okay. What was your reaction to being told that Benji was back in diapers?
I was, I couldn't believe it.
It surprised you.
Yes.
So, was there anything else that you heard in this same general time frame? We're talking June 2021. That surprised you about Benji's behavior?
The injury to himself, hurting himself.
So, what injury are you talking about?
Putting things in his ears, hitting his head against the wall, or biting on his fingernails.
And how did you find out about those injuries?
I was told.
By who?
My brother, Brandon.
And what was your reaction to your brother telling you this?
I felt, my reaction was something was wrong. I felt kind of put me in like a mama bear mode, but I was concerned.
And did you mention those concerns to Brandon?
Some of it, yes.
And in fact, did you tell Brandon that you thought that he had to figure out what was going on?
Sustained.
What did you say to him that you thought he should do?
He needed to be taken to a doctor.
How many times did you talk to him about taking Benjamin to the doctor?
In that time period, at that time,
Yeah.
just once.
Okay. So it wasn't actually on at least 2 occasions that you discussed with your brother Benji's need for care?
And that time, it was that one time.
Okay, so was there another time
Yeah, before this, yes.
before this? When was that?
When I was caring for him, when I was watching him for him.
Okay. So there was more than once, it's just that only one of them was after you stopped watching?
Yes.
Okay. Isn't it true, what if anything did Brandon say to you about Benjamin's eating habits in around June of 2021?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
Sure. What, if anything, did Brandon tell you about Benjamin's eating habits in the months before his death?
He was eating a lot. He was eating more than he should have. He was eating like a man, like eating big meals. He was always trying to climb up, get into the refrigerator or the pantries to get more food after he had just eaten.
And what was your response to being told that he's trying to get additional food?
Why was he looking for more food? If he was being fed, why was he looking for more food?
How receptive would you say your brother was to your parenting advice generally?
Can you ask me that in a different way, please?
When you give parenting advice to Brandon, how likely is he to follow it?
He listens. It's good. He'll listen to it.
Do you remember on the day that Benji died speaking with the detective at the San Antonio Police Department?
Yes.
Do you remember stating to the officer that Brandon is easily offended in matters of parenting and his children?
Yes. If it's given to him in a certain way.
Okay. So the presentation is very important for his reaction.
Yes.
So you're receiving this information about Benji, some things that concerned you back in June, right? So what, if anything, did you do about your concerns regarding Benjamin's health? Did you contact anyone?
I did. I contacted CPS.
And when was that?
It had to have been between June or July.
June or July?
Yes,
This-
so 2021.
July 20th, does that sound about right to you? You don't know.
I don't remember.
Okay. But it was you that called CPS and told them what?
That I was concerned for my nephew.
Based on some of the things that your brother had told you?
Yes.
I think what I want to establish is, in this time period, from when Brandon starts telling you these things until you call CPS, how many times did you yourself actually see Benji in person?
None.
But you had information that Brandon was giving you, is that fair to say?
Yes.
And I believe you said that he had shown you a picture also at some point of Benji.
I saw a photo of Benji, yes.
And so it was those things that led you to call CPS. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
And that's the way it should.
Yes, okay, so, let me ask, when Benji comes to live with Brandon in January of 2019, how long is it after he comes to live with Brandon that you come to start watching over Benji? Do you recall?
After Jenny? I'm sorry.
Yeah, after Benji comes to live with Brandon, right, he becomes a custodial parent. From that point, do you remember how much time passes before you have Benji?
I don't remember.
Okay, let me ask you, you said that you got pregnant and you went on bed rest.
Yes.
Do you remember that date?
It was in between, I want to say maybe in February
Of
2021.
Okay. February 2021 is when you stopped watching Benji?
Yes.
And you only watched him for 6 months prior to that?
Yes.
So 6 months, August 2020 is when you approximately started watching him? So I'm backing it up.
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm not sure on the dates.
Well, I'm just roughly speaking, you're saying that, so February 2021 is the last time you watched him.
Yes.
And then 6 months behind that, 2 months, February, January is 2, and then 4 months from 12 is 8, right? So August. Does that sound about right? Or do you think it was less than 6 months that you watched him?
No, I believe it was about 6 months that I watched him.
Okay. All right. So you talked about needing Benji, like suggesting that Benji go to the doctor once before, with 2 times. You listed 2 times, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the first time you say was when you were watching Benji.
Yes.
Okay. And were there complications? What was it that he needed to go to the doctor for?
His, one of the reasons I said that was because he wouldn't get full after eating. He would want to eat like if he hadn't eaten before, and I didn't find that to be normal. And knowing where he had come from, I felt that he needed to get seen by a doctor.
Now, let me ask you. So you say where he had come from. Had Benji been he was living with a biological mother prior to 2019,
Yes.
or January 2019? And in regards to that, Brandon did not have access to Benjamin at that time.
No.
Okay. So something happened at biological mother's house that had nothing to do with Brandon, correct?
Correct.
And is that why Benjamin came to live with Brandon?
Yes.
Now, when I say Brandon didn't have anything to do with Benji at that time, it was because the biological mother was keeping the kids from Brandon, correct?
Yes.
So he wasn't able to see them.
Correct.
It wasn't because he didn't want to see them, correct?
Correct.
So now you just mentioned that you did not have any personal knowledge of what Benji was doing day to day in June of 2021, correct?
Correct.
Or July of 2021.
Correct.
And the only knowledge you have is from what Brandon self-disclosed to you.
Yes.
And would you agree with me that he wasn't hiding anything from you?
No, he wasn't hiding anything.
And he was freely giving you the picture?
Yes.
And so, and then he was having a conversation with you about his child that he's concerned about.
Yes.
And I apologize, going back to that doctor's visit, were there complications back in August of 2020 to February of 2021 getting in to see a doctor?
Yes.
Okay, and why?
The biologic,
Judge, I'm gonna object to lack of personal knowledge on this.
You can establish how she knows the sort of things.
Are you aware personally of why, did you try to take Benji to the doctor?
I did.
Okay, and even, did you have complications taking Benji to the doctor?
I did.
And why?
My children's care provider let me know that I am not allowed to take Benji unless I have a letter signed by the mother giving me permission to take Benjamin to get seen.
And they wouldn't even take the letter from Brandon, would they?
No.
Because he is not listed as the actual parent by law. They were not married.
No, they're not married.
Okay, and so, they did not find it sufficient for Brandon just to say he's the father of Benji.
Correct.
I apologize, I spoke over you. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay, so the only one they would listen to was Erica Flores,
Yes.
and that's the name of Benji's biological mother.
Yes.
And y'all couldn't get a hold of her?
No, she was very hard to find. She was,
Judge, I'm anticipating that the response is about to verge into hearsay.
Let me stop you there, because you answered my question. So you weren't able to get a hold of her, and so, but ultimately, would you agree with me that Brandon does wind up taking Benji to the doctor, and, he takes him to an ER doctor?
yes.
Now, going forward to, do y'all have diabetes in your family?
Yes.
Do you have diabetes?
Yes.
What kind of diabetes do you have?
I believe it was type 2.
Type
It's
2?
type 2.
Or is it?
It was, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. It was, I don't know if it was type 1 or type 2, but it was during my pregnancy and then after it
Okay.
stayed.
All right, so you don't know if it was type 1 or type 2?
Correct.
Okay. Did you testify previously that it was type 1?
I might have.
Okay. Now, how about in regards to the rest of your family? Who else in your family has diabetes?
My mother, my grandmother, and I believe both my sisters.
Okay, and do you know if they have type 1 or type 2?
I don't know.
his birthday?
I don't, tomorrow, I believe it is.
Oh, okay. So, September 28th, 2016. And so if we go to February of 2021, I believe that's just about a little less than it's like a little less than 4.5, right?
Yes.
Okay, so backing up to, let's see. So he would have been 4 years old when you had him. I think we're off on dates. Because, did you say you had him when he was 2 years old?
He was two or about to be 2. I'm not sure on the dates. I know it was in 2019 that I first received him to watch him, that I agreed to watch him. And then,
All right, so, because if I'm not mistaken, earlier you said August 2020 to February 2021, and that would have been when he was turning 4 and then going into his 4th year. So that's not correct.
no, it's not. It's not.
Okay.
I'm
And
sorry.
Maybe I wrote it down wrong, so I want to be very clear. So so we can write the dates down. So if you say, so if Benji came to Brandon in January of 2019, and you think that you had him in February of 2019, because couldn't have had him before 2019.
No, it had to have been in 2019 because I then went into labor in 2020. It had to have been 2019.
Okay. So you think maybe February of 2019, or you don't know? Let's go back and talk about you say that you went into bed rest. Maybe we got the years wrong. So when
Yeah,
did
'cause-
you go into bed rest?
That was in the year 2021. I had 2 children. So when I'm trying to think with my pregnancies, I was pregnant in 2019, and that's I was. Oh gosh, I'm getting myself confused.
Okay, well, let's go this direction. You know that you did not watch Benjamin when he was 3 or 4, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And if Benji doesn't even get to Brandon until January 2019, then it could only have been from the time period starting in January 2019 to when he turns 3 would have, when he turns 4. He was born in September, right?
Right.
And that would have been 2020. So, I mean, at this point, he has not turned. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay. 2019. Oh my gosh, long day. I apologize, guys. Okay, so January 2019 to September 2019, because he would turn 3 September 2019. So between there, can you tell me that range? You just 6 months in between there. Is that
Yes.
somewhere in between there?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So January 2019 to September of 2019. That's gonna make it because he would have been 36 months, and that would have been somewhere right in between here, correct? Because here's 30 months and 40 months. I can't write on this because it's been admitted, but so you had him somewhere between here and here. Now, he goes to the doctor after that, and while in Brandon's care, Brandon has him for these 30 months, right? From January 2019 until he passes on August 2021. Okay. And during the time that Brandon had him, did you get to see him even if you weren't watching him, or is the last time that you saw him
I saw him one more time. After I was done watching him, I saw him one more time.
When did you see him?
It was in February, I believe the year of 2021.
Okay, and when you saw him, did he look like he had a healthy weight?
Yes, he looked a little taller, stretched out, but yeah,
And has Benji always been a small kid?
yes.
Always been a skinny kid?
Yes.
I pass the witness.
So, I mean, you have 10 children. Who's responsible for getting medical care for your 10 children?
I am.
And if there's something where the insurance is saying, hey, we need some additional documentation, who would be responsible for getting it?
Myself, me, the mother.
Nothing further.
May this witness be excused?
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez, thank you very much. You are excused. The rule has been invoked, which means you may not discuss your testimony with anybody but these attorneys, okay? Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Do you have one more to close up the day, or?
I do, but
Okay, well, let's try.
Is she pending recall?
No,
Okay.
she's released. And just for the record, Ms. Sawyer's that's fine with you, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Please come have a seat. Please raise your right hand and state your full name.
Amy Claudette Cepeda.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Cepeda, you can move that microphone however you need to. The young lady in front of you is a court reporter. She writes down everything you say, so it's important you speak loudly enough for her to hear and slowly, and do not speak over anyone.
Yes,
If
ma'am.
you see any of these attorneys stand up while you're speaking, just stop talking and we'll let you know when it's safe to proceed, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
can proceed.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Amy. What is your last name?
My maiden name is Flores and my married name is Cepeda.
Is what?
Cepeda.
Cepeda.
Mhm.
Are you related to Benjamin Cepeda?
Yes.
How so?
I am his aunt on the maternal side.
Okay, so Benji's mom is who to you?
My sister,
And what is Benji's mother's name?
Erica Lala Flores.
Were you present in Benji's life out around the time that he was born?
Yes.
And did you live in close proximity to him?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. When he was an infant, do you recall approximately how often you would see him?
If I recall correctly, frequently he was a premature baby, so we would see him at the hospital and go visit Erica and Brandon.
Okay. Once he was out of the hospital, did you see him?
Yes.
And how often would you see him?
Maybe like once a week, twice a week, just depending. I think during that time, Erica would watch my oldest, my baby, Jamie. She would babysit her and stuff.
Mrs. Cepeda, sorry, you're a little soft spoken. Can you hold the mic a little bit closer to you? You can actually move the mic. The whole thing. So, how long did Benjamin live with Erica?
I want to say like the first 2 years of his life.
And eventually did Benji come to live with you for a short period of time?
Yes,
When was that?
I think January 6th, 2019, if I'm not mistaken.
Prior to him coming to live with you for a little bit, can you describe Benji for the jury?
Yes, he was really sweet. He was funny, like adventurous. He would like to be chased around a lot, carried, babied. He was a light.
What are when Benji came to live with you, did you have your own kids at that time?
I had one.
And how long did Benji come stay with you?
I would say just like a few days, maybe like 1 to 3 days. I think January 6th, I think that was the last day that he was with me.
Okay. When Benji, prior to coming to live with you, did you ever see him eat?
Yes,
Can you describe his eating patterns for the jury?
yes. He would eat like whenever he wanted, whenever he was with us. If he wanted, like if I was eating Chinese food, he would want some Chinese food. If I was drinking Kool-Aid, he was like, I want some Kool-Aid too, and I would give him some, and he just wouldn't stop. He loved food, and he loved to play, and he loved to laugh too.
Do you recall him having any favorite foods?
I think the most thing that I can remember is Chinese food. We eat a lot of Chinese food in our family, so I think if I can recall, that's what I remember us eating a lot of.
So during this first 2 years of his life, you see him get bigger,
Yes,
you see him grow taller,
yes,
you see him put on weight.
yes,
Do you see him hit his milestones?
yes,
Do you see him when he starts babbling?
yes,
Do you see him when he starts crawling?
yes, and climbing.
I have one like that right now.
Yes,
Did you see when he started walking?
yes.
When he came to live with you for those few days, did he spend basically 24 hours with you?
Yes.
Again, the eating, was there any difference in the eating when he was living with you?
No, he definitely kept up with my oldest one. She's a few years older than him.
Okay. After Benji comes to stay with you for that short period of time, where does he go after that?
I connected with his paternal grandfather, Daniel Cervera, and I gave both of the boys, baby Brennan and Benjamin, to Danny to take care of.
And I should have asked you from the beginning, when Benji comes to
Just 1 second, sir.
5 minutes, please.
Hold on for 5 minutes.
All right, the jury.